friends, welcome back to my channel. We are here today to chat Caribbean books, and my voice is not completely back, but it's much improved. So even though it may still be a little groggy, it might still be a little froggy is really the word I'm looking for. I know you'll forgive me because I don't want to lose out on the opportunity to chat Caribbean books with you. So there are 3 days remaining in Readathon, including today. And I know you've been reading. Some of you have been telling me what you've been reading, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on what you've been reading, how you've been loving these Caribbean books that you have been picking up. So in this video today, I'm going to talk briefly about some of the Caribbean books that I own. So we could call this a bookshelf tour, except these books don't actually reside on a shelf currently. It's not a bookshelf tour if there's no bookshelf, right? I got rid of a bookshelf a few months ago. I gave the shelf to a family member. I don't know yet if we're going to replace the shelf or if I'm just downsizing my book collection, which I think it's more leaning towards that. Some of these are books that I love, but I don't think I'm going to reread just because we have so many fantastic new books being released all the time. And I want to give myself opportunity to experience new authors, new stories. So just because I love a book doesn't mean that I need to own it, because I might not be rereading it. Like, it's not sufficient to just own books to show them on camera, right? So if I'm not intending to really reread them, do I really need to own them? I don't know. That's a question that is still being answered. So for now, I'm inviting you to tour the Caribbean with me with some of these books that I culled from my book stack. One book per country, I think. And I'm just going to tell you why I own these books, what I thought about them very, very briefly. So we're going to start with Haiti, Zoboi's American Street. Zoboi is a Haitian woman living in the United States. And this one tells the story of a young girl, a teenage girl who I think was born in the United States, lived in Haiti for most of her childhood, and when she's returning to the United States, she and her mother are separated. It's a little bit about her finding her own footing here in the United States while she's hoping to reconnect and trying to reconnect with her mother, and how she calls on the spirits of her homeland, how she connects with the lessons that have been taught to her of her ancestors, recent ancestors and long past ancestors. And that connection, American Street, is the intersection of her present and her past. And I really enjoy how Zoboi portrays this Caribbean background, this meeting of Caribbean ethnicity and Caribbean heritage, Caribbean culture, and the new life that an immigrant has to take on when they come into a new country. And I like how she portrays that to a young adult audience. I didn't give this 5 stars when I read it, but this is one of those books that I think I may reread now and love it even more than I did when I first read it. So still recommending Zoboi's American Street. Jamaica Kincaid. This is my favorite of her books, Annie John, just because I love how Annie John talks about relationships between mothers and daughters. And in this one, we get the full range of complexity of that relationship, what it means for a mother, what it means for a daughter as they're growing up and establishing new identities separate from each other. And it's about that bond that feels stifling, I'm sure feels smothering in some times, in some ways, but is also like the umbilical cord. It is necessary for survival, and then it has to be cut, which is also a necessary part of the survival. Like the umbilical cord has to be severed at some point. And in this book we get that experience fleshed out as it is being experienced by the child, Annie John, who is named after her mother, and is really the opportunity for her mother to live in this new generation. But Annie John sees herself as an individual, and it's about her individual choices. Man, do I love this book. So Jamaica Kincaid, despite her name, is an Antiguan woman living in the United States, and I just absolutely love her writing. Oh, I was going to tell you why I bought these books. Why do I buy Caribbean books? This one I think I bought for Readathon the first year. The first year we had Readathon, I think. I can't remember. And this one, I've been reading Jamaica Kincaid I've been reading Jamaica Kincaid ever since I was first introduced to her when I started college. When I came to the United States, it was my first time I read Jamaica Kincaid, my first semester in college. We read an excerpt in one of my college English classes, and I have loved her writing ever since. This one I bought because it was a selection for the Run Right Reads book club. So this is How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. The author is Cherie Jones. And this one is set in Barbados, and we're reading about life, the life being lived by people who work in the tourist industry, and their entire lives seem to be dedicated towards this portrayal of island paradise, but their lives are not paradise. Their lives, even though they live on the outskirts of paradise, they live on the periphery, on the fringes of paradise. Their lives are as far from paradise as it is possible to be. And we read a lot about the domestic issues and how it impacts the woman and how it impacts the child, and what it means for a relationship when people are not completely being honest with each other, not completely being honest with themselves. And it's just, there's a lot about relationship. There is a lot about commitment and loyalty and what those things mean. How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House also includes this very moving discussion about relationships between parent-child in a couple of different iterations. And man, this is a really intense read, but also one that I highly recommend. I think I have reviews for some of these books on the channel. If I can find links, I'll put them down below. The Bridge of Beyond by Simone, Schwarz, Bart was one of the first books that we read for the Run Right Reads book club a couple of years ago. This was originally written in French and it is translated from the French by Barbara Bray. And Simone Schwarz Bart is from Guadeloupe. And this one talks a little bit about relationships, again, between mothers and daughters, but also the differences of experiences of women, from women who experienced slavery and the transition into emancipation, but also how life is different for their daughters and their granddaughters, what remains the same in the experience of womanhood, but also what changes. Highly recommend this. And I know that Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading is also highlighting this as the Read So Lit book club pick this month. So if you have a chance to join the book club over there, you can still read and discuss this one this month. Pleasantview by Celeste Mohammed was our Readathon group read last year, and so we talked about this extensively. I had a discussion with the author, and that is on my Instagram. The live is still there. And this one is a short story collection showing, again, not so pleasant view of life in Trinidad in a previous generation. And it is short stories following characters, but also showing the life in a town, how different the experiences of people who work around an industry, the people who are profiting from the industry, as well as the people who are literally selling themselves for the industry, and how crime is experienced through a family, through the father and the child. I feel like this was a really good way to read about Trinidad, as well as the influx of people from South America coming to the Caribbean, and a little bit about what that lifestyle is like, what that life is like for people who move back and forth. Because, you know, we hear a lot about people who immigrate from the Caribbean. We don't hear too much about people who immigrate to the Caribbean from other places. And so I really like that. Celeste Mohammed, like I said, is Trinidadian. This one, the Bocas Lit Fest prize last year, and so we were thrilled to talk with the author about that. Forced Ripe by Cindy McKenzie was another selection for the Run Right Reads book club, and I've talked with the author. Did she come on our book club discussion? I think so. I can't recall. I think so. Yeah. So this is a novelization of the author's childhood, and it is again another really intense read about a child who is kind of left behind when the parents go off to make their fortune, but also, you know, what happens to the child when the parents aren't around to physically protect them, but also what happens when the parents are around and they still don't make great choices. We get a lot of discussion about harmful things that happen to this child, including colorism and classism, but also a big focus on how different genders are treated. Intense, but also highly recommend. And this one is set in Grenada. There's a little bit about the political things that happen in Grenada, but also how they're experienced by a child. So it kind of whets the appetite for learning more about the history of Grenada. For Jamaica, I'm gonna just put this book right here. Augustown by Kyle Miller is still one of my favorite books to have read from the Caribbean. Kyle Miller really shines a light on the treatment of Rastafarians and how, you know, now culturally we regard Rastafarians in high acclaim. We know a lot about the music that is produced by people who are Rastafarians, but in this book Kyle Miller really focuses on how Rastafarians were not so highly acclaimed in the previous generation in Jamaica, and he shows what that means when it is lived out by children. There's a lot about religion and a little bit of that bias of cultures. Highly recommend Augustown by Kyle Miller. Things I have withheld, but his essays is the current book club pick for the Run Right Reads book club this month. Essays, highly recommend. I'm not quite finished currently reading it, but highly recommend. But this was my first thing that I read from this author, and it's still one of my favorite things to have read. From Puerto Rico, we have The House on the Lagoon by Rosario Ferre. This was also a book club pick in a previous year, and I really enjoyed this. This one was unique in that we had the author breaking the third wall. Is that how we call it? The author of the novel is talking directly to the reader, and we get to the different ways that a husband and wife talk about their family as they are writing like the biography of their family. I really enjoyed how Rosario Ferre portrayed the change in culture in Puerto Rico, a little bit about the history and how history is lived, but also how it's represented. And of course, how the author changes the story to fit their own biases. Really enjoyed that. And then this is a book that I have not yet read. This is Heretics by Leonardo Padura. This one is set in Cuba, and I haven't yet read it. It's a big book, but it's very meaningful to me for another reason, which I think I've talked about here. And this one is a little bit about religion in Cuba, religious paintings, so a little bit about art and history and Cuba in the early 1900s, so before communism. And one day I'm going to get to it. It's a big book, so I haven't yet read it, but I'm still recommending it because I feel like we don't talk enough about books set in Cuba. So these are some Caribbean books that I own, a little bit about why I bought them. Oh, I have to tell you the story then, because this is about why I bought the books. So this one was the book that I bought the day that I found out that I was expecting our daughter. So when I found out, when I left the doctor's office, I went to the bookstore, and this is the book that I came home with. So those are books that I own that are Caribbean, and that's why I own them. So let me know in the comments down below, what's your favorite Caribbean read that you own, that you personally own, if you have a physical copy or a Kindle version. It doesn't matter. Let me know the story behind your book. So this is part one of these videos. Hopefully, I have lots of Caribbean books, so we will probably come back and make another one like this. Let me know if you're interested in this kind of footage. So thank you so much for watching, and until we come back for another video, I hope you're enjoying Readathon, and until then, happy reading. Bye.